You all read all about her. You saw her movies. So let's welcome the prolific and talented Erin Lee Carr.
Hey, very, very excited to be here.
Thank you for coming, really. We really appreciate it. We want to ask you all about the Britney documentary. But before that, how did you start in the business? Did you start as a journalist?
So I as a high schooler, I was obsessed with the magazine Entertainment Weekly, and I would read everything in it, page to page, cover to cover, excuse me. And I really wanted to be a film critic. And I asked my father, who I have very close relationship. His name is David Carr. He was a reporter for the New York Times, and he said, how many film critic jobs do you think are out there? And I said, I don't know, like 6. And he was like, we're gonna pick a different avenue. And so I had this strong male lead in my life direct me, but that was the last time I would ever have that in my life. I've been choosing my own shots since then. And for me, it was really documentary filmmaking. I saw women in power. I saw women as directors. I saw them as producers. I saw them as talent. And I saw documentary as a form of accountability. So while I really wanted to be a journalist and a film critic, I saw a job as a documentary filmmaker that was all these things that I loved put together. And I've been doing it since I was like 21, and I'm 33 now.
And I must say that you have been very prolific in those years. I mean, really, you have put up so much out there. How did the Britney Vs Spears, how did the documentary come about?
So I was able to work with Netflix on a series called How to Fix a Drug Scandal. And we were, I was sitting with my executives, and we were kind of talking about how the series went. And I don't often get alone time with Netflix executives on park benches. So I heard in my mind, like, shoot your shot, like, go, like, what, and I usually, I'm an insane researcher. And if there's anything I can impress upon the individuals here, like, before I do just a random, like, a meeting with Netflix like that, where we weren't really going to talk about pitches, I had 6 to 8 pitches in my head. I have done 4 to 6 hours on research on the executives. I know what Netflix put out the previous week. And so when they asked me in that moment, and they said, what do you want to do next? And I said, I want to do Britney Spears. And at the time, Britney, this was in May 2019, where it wasn't even clear if Britney, like, how she felt about being in a conservatorship. And me being a very pugnacious but naive young filmmaker, I was like, you know what, like, I'm gonna crack it. Like, I really think that I'm gonna crack it. No one else has. They had been, Netflix had been pitched, a Britney Spears story like 13 times before. But because of my background in mental health and the films that I made, they selected me as the person they would go forward in doing it. And we really, very legally risky, intense, and so had to get a really strong production company. I've been able to work with some of the best documentary production companies in my industry. And we, there was Liz Garbus, who's one of my favorite filmmakers. Sure. She opened up a company called Story Syndicate. We got this party started.
Wow. What did you actually pitch other than I want to do about Britney? Because obviously you must have given them some kind of an angle or right?
This is
your researcher that
not one, FYI. So my pitch was, Britney did not get her shot at her legacy. I think a lot of people saw her as a manufactured pop icon from the Jive record era days. And if you look at her trajectory, she had hit after hit after hit. And her, there's so much about power and control as it relates to Britney Spears' life. And so when she had the very public mental health struggles, it felt to me incredibly unfair. And there had not been a documentary, I think because, well, I shouldn't say that. There are potentially reasons why there had not been a documentary made previously. But I also would say that a lot of people in the industry would just say, I don't want to get involved in that. That's a train wreck. It's really risky. There's a reason that no other filmmaker has done this. And every single film that I've done, which I think is about 6 or 7, because I'm finishing one right now, is no, people would not have, other people in my industry would not have done it. There was no access. It was really hard to film something like that. When people are saying no to you, but you believe that you have a story or have a screenplay or have something, like, you have to do it. And I'm sure many of Tova's guests have said that, but I'm, literally saying a lot of my ideas were turned down until I showed them, like, no, this is going to be a really big thing.
So, what was interesting also in the movie is kind of like, it was like a double thing between you and Jenny, right, from the Rolling Stone. And that was quite interesting. So how did that happen, that kind of cooperation between the two of you? Because she was a real fan, and you were just a journalist looking at it from a different angle a little bit.
Well, I think that Jenny had written the liner notes for one of Britney's albums. She was one of the Britney people. If you're looking for information about Britney, you're going to come across Jenny Elliott. And I really did not want to have news archive in the film, like, Britney Spears does this, and so we needed sort of narrators, and I was really reluctant to put myself in. But I felt a lot better if it was this sort of Betty and Veronica, these two women trying to figure it out. And, it was very painful because our automatic assumption when we're watching women in television, specifically in documentaries, that they're looking for attention. Why are they doing that? And while a lot of my male contemporaries have been able to put themselves inside the documentaries, you're not going to see many women doing it. And so that was also something I said, I'm not super comfortable with this, but, I'm all about sort of pushing gender stereotypes and pushing boundaries. And I said, I'm going to try it. And it has risks and rewards.
Well, I just love the line that you said, because it was like, how are we going to this the whole thing about Brittany, get above the noise. And you said, we scream. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there was a scream. So it certainly shone a light on conservancy. And you said it played in like 25 markets and was #1. So
it played in over 100 markets. It was the most, it basically, when you're having a story like that, they knew it was going to be widely seen, but because I think Netflix is in 110 countries, and I think it was even more than #1 in 25 countries. So it was sort of a conservative guess. But when you have the #1 movie on Netflix in the world, it was just wild. I could feel it through the internet and through Twitter and through socials. I feel that way often when my HBO work is coming out during like the night of. It's so amazing. But that's my favorite part of making films, is feeling the reaction to it. Because I'm a student of the internet. It's how I learn about things. It's what I make, content for. And so that was just, is pretty wild.
Yeah. So, one of the things that probably helped is basically the coordination between what was happening in court and your coming out and so on and so forth. And look at the impact that it did. Obviously there was the whole Free Britney, but also in your documentary, you really didn't see just a bunch of people saying Free Britney. You just saw what's going on really behind the scene. And how absurd was it that Jenny just couldn't get a lawyer for her, no matter what it tried. And certainly I think the movie, basically, I think that it contributed to this new historic change where, you know, the conservatee is going to be allowed to choose their own lawyer. Duh. You know, I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. I mean, when you see those lawyers that never listened to her, it was just a horrifying thing.
I really agree. Like when I was making the film, I was like, am I crazy? Like, why is this not, like, she's not able to? And the sheer amount of times that Britney requested her own lawyer, it just was sort of, it was mind boggling. So that was going to be a really strong center of the piece from the start. And, you know, in terms of it having an impact, I think it was just, I do have to throw credit to the Free Britney movement, because I did not feature it because they had been in this kind of this New York Times piece that had been shown previously. And, you know, it was, for me, it was really about the court documents and the original reporting. But, you know, you look at Britney Spears now and she's out and on Instagram and doing stuff, and I obviously check it every day. And she credits the Free Britney movement for her, you know, for her being freed. And so I think that I'm glad to be but a humble player. I would never call Netflix a humble player, but it was, I just think it's incredible that a crowd-based fan movement helped push everybody into this global reckoning point. And I do think it will have intended consequences for the conservatorship industry.
Yeah, all over the world. I think it will start here and then it will just go in other places. Makes you feel good as a right?
Yeah, I mean, all of my movies end up in really sad, horrific places. So I was very happy that there was a happy ending. I did not know if that was going to be the case.
Yeah, well, it was very powerful, and I'm sure the students are going to ask you more questions about it. How and where do you pick your subjects?
Now I'm able, really, I feel really grateful. I have a development deal with HBO where I develop all of my films for them and content. And so I've been able to assemble a small team. And we have a binder of, like, you know, ELC, that's my three initials, like these are the ideas. And so I have a bullet point of, I need it to be focused on women or non-binary people. I need there to be a crime. I want there to be a societal implication in what this crime is. It can't be a this happened and this happened sort of thing. I want it to feel dramatic, to have tension, and then also to add to that virality. Like I want to design films that get people saying, did you see this on Twitter?
Okay, how do you explore virality? How do you achieve virality?
So for me, and I did this, so I worked at Vice in my early 20s, and one of my first produced pieces had 7 million views, and it was called How to Survive in Space, and it was about tardigrades. And then I had a film
about what?
About tardigrades, these little microscopic space bears, and it was about, like, enlightenment, really. And then I did this movie on a 3D printed weapon. It was called Click Print Gun. That got 8 million views in the first week. And so I have always been able to spot what will be a big discussion point. That is the number one thing I bring to these networks, and being able to know what the big thing is before the big thing happens. And I really do that by reading a lot of Reddit, by talking to a lot of people, by monitoring the internet, and kind of looking at places that are potentially, like, I'm not going to go to the New York Times Magazine and be like, oh, here's a story. You know, I have to have really underrepresented spaces. And it's harder now because there's about 5 to 10 times more competition in the space. But I still feel like I can figure it out.
So it's the journalist who just really, what's going to be the head.
And it's knowing good people. Like when I was starting this deal, I was like, you know, to journalists that I adore, I said, if you ever want to make a documentary, I'm here. And, you know, really being out there on Instagram, on Twitter. I can't take unsolicited pitches now because of legal stuff, because I never want people to feel like, you know, oh, I'm doing an idea. But yeah, definitely following certain journalists' work and what they're doing, and then trying to figure out what my own interests are. And I basically pitch and do all of my own work. I think a lot of documentary directors, they get assigned a piece, like saying, oh, I want this director for this piece, and you kind of get wrapped in. And I think I love being able to come up with the idea and then being able to execute on it and work with for me, a pretty big team.
That's interesting. Is there any other thing to virality other than the instinct that you have, that you're probably born with and sharpened around it?
It's tracking drugs, it's tracking guns, it's tracking crime stories, it's tracking the Daily Mail, it's tracking what are the Twitter topics, what are people talking about. I often don't do celebrity, which is funny given my latest work, but now, like, being able to spot trends, and like, I'm not a creator of trends, I'm a watcher of trends. And so there is actually a real logistical way that you can track what people are talking about.
Wow, that's really interesting. Do you think that a director should have a real connection to the subject matter? And if yes, how do you stay neutral?
That's a great question. It's something that I wish we spoke more about, the ethics related to filmmaking, and specifically I deal with human beings, and I end up making films about them, which are journalistic in nature, but can be rendered as entertainment. And so it's always been having to be really, really, really careful. So yeah, I think that I often have a very close, tie-in to, I make a lot of films about addiction. I'm a proudly out sober person. I've been sober for 6 years. So trying to add insight into that, but also, like, I can never write a film and know the ending. I have to be completely open to what the ending is going to be. For example, when I started working on I Love You Now Die, which is the Michelle Carter film about the texting suicide case, I was convinced she was guilty, right? All of the portrayal, a lot of the evidence suggested a lot of guilt. And then when you were able to like sift and go through it, and I saw how much mental health issues there were, and it felt to me a bit underreported, and that's what that film did for HBO. I didn't expect to have a change of feeling, and what was great is I get to work with Andrew Rossi, my producer, and he said, what if the audience is in on that, your opinion flipped, right? The first part is how I came to the story, and the second part is what I found. And so really almost making the shifts like a part of the story, because I'm really a proxy for the audience.
That's very interesting. Yeah. Okay. So do we have some questions of students? Because I can talk to Erin forever, but I think it's for them.
We do. We have a question from Gustavo David. Gustavo, we've enabled you to unmute yourself. What is your question for Erin?
Well, thank you so much for your time. So I was gonna ask, also, you're amazing inspiration. You did an amazing job doing the documentary. As a Britney fan, I feel so happy that you have a voice for her. And yeah, thank you so much. So my question will be, do you consider to do a second part of this documentary, but with Britney, because now she have a new chapter with a good ending, and she can be in the documentary if she wants, of course.
Gustavo, going cutting right to the chase, man. I mean, I will say on record that I would absolutely adore to do a second part with her. I'm obviously working on it, but Britney has a lot of things that she's going to do first. And so I don't expect, she's been very sort of outspoken about being on Oprah, so I'm really intrigued. But I would drop everything, anything to go even to meet her off the record. I'm a huge Britney fan. I put my almost like 7 days a week for 2.5 years into that film. And if I were ever able to spend time with her, I think it would be significant, but really about using the megaphone of documentary to talk about her experience. When she was in the conservatorship, she was not able to at all. And so that's what I needed to make clear. Everyone's like, why did you do this without Britney? And it said, that you can't, and she's under this ruling that people need to know about. So yes to all of the above. And I think we as a group should put the vibes out there to her that I'm available to chat.
Thank you so much.
Great. We have a question here from Michael Masiello. Michael, we've enabled you to unmute yourself. What is your question for Erin?
I also really appreciate the documentary. I'm also a huge Britney fan. And my question is, after the whole Free Britney movement and, you know, everything that happened with Britney, did she ever reach out to you or anyone in her circle about the documentary? I think it's really important that she acknowledges these documentaries. Obviously, there's been other ones as well. And I really do think that the documentaries contributed to a lot of the movement, especially to the Free Britney movement.
You know, I think that she did not go on Instagram and talk about our film negatively. There were inferences inside her Instagram that she was watching things. I haven't gotten a direct read on how she felt about it. But here's the thing is that we watched that documentary sort of going through her trauma. She lived through the trauma. So while I made it with her in mind, that it would feel sensitive, I think if I was really thinking about it, it would be too painful to watch. It really serves its purpose, which is to put a spotlight on the injustices that she faced over the course of the conservatorship, but really her life, and trying to understand that. So while I'm hopeful that that she potentially liked it, I would completely understand if it was not something that she could sit through.
Yeah, I get that. I think there's a part of me that's just hoping that, you know, Britney will speak out more about the efforts of the documentaries and acknowledge that.
She like hated that New York Times documentary. She said it made her cry for 2 weeks. So I was like, please don't do that. Like, I can't.
Right.
I can't emotionally deal with that. I'll have to get like double therapy time. So I was just thankful of that. And, you know, there's questions if she even said that and things like that, but it's always a bit out there in Britney world, but we all enjoy that.
I actually had another question too, in regards to the other documentary, the New York Times. How did you feel with that coming out? Because the first one came out back earlier the year, in the beginning of the year, and then it followed with the second one. And I actually thought the second one was better because they actually had some more sources that like spoke out. And it seemed like they like threw it out right before your documentary came out. So I feel like they were trying to like, you know, be the center of the attention, you know? So I'm kind of curious to know what your thoughts were about that.
You know, I think that they put out something that they had amazing access on, which was the security firm. You know, our film was really about the comprehensive view of the conservatorship. I can't speak to the sort of the strategy on that. I did find it unusual that it was just a couple of days before ours, but, you know, me being honest with myself, you know, we did it right around when Britney was going to court you know, to try and end her conservatorship, specifically, you know, her role of her father as conservator. So, you know, I have lots of feelings about that. I won't say it in public, but I do. It's like me on a level of what is going to be helpful to Britney Spears is that came out and that information. And then my film was able to, you know, play a comprehensive role. But I just appreciate all the reporting that's been done on it. And I follow great reporters, and I won't be the first, I won't be the last. I'm just in, you know, good company.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you for that. We have a question here from Juan Montoya. Juan, we've enabled you to unmute yourself. What is your question for Erin?
Hi, Erin. First of all, I want to say thank you for making this documentary for all Britney fans. It means so much. And I wanted to ask you, how did the making of this film change you personally and as a professional?
Great question. I have never worked more in my life, and I'm saying that as a workaholic. It was obscene, specifically due to the evolving nature of the story. Like, you know, people would be messaging me at 10, 11, 1, 2, I constantly had to track it. And it really, in this weird way, was 1/1000th of the experience that Britney had, but it was painful. You end up feeling kind of paranoid. Are people following you? Are people trying to phish you and get in my email? I had to do a lot of work around that, making sure that I was, fine in that department, shifting over emails. So one, it was just a really painful process. But then some days I would be in, like, it was during COVID, and I was in this like small room in Connecticut, and I was like, holy fucking shit, I'm like investigating a conservatorship of Britney Spears, and like I'm actually getting people reaching out to me, because for the first 6 months, no one would talk to me. I am not kidding you. Like the choreographer from 14 years ago was like, no. So I think that while it was painful, like it was the most exhilarating time of my entire life for sure. And my whole way of working, interacting feels different. I used to be like a really intense, high energy person, which I obviously am, but I'm doing like scripted shows, I'm doing these other things, and like, it's just nothing is as stressful as Britney Spears. And so, I've been able to, just like take it down a notch. So it changed me in so many ways. I think those were just two of the ways, but definitely sort of like life altering for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a question here from Jamie Blanton from our LA campus. Jamie, we've enabled you to unmute yourself. What is your question for Erin?
Hey, Erin, I think first I want to say congratulations on your sobriety. I just made 10 months like a few days ago, so that's awesome. My actual question though is, what would you say the research phase is like when you're starting a new documentary?
Totally. Well, thank you. Congrats on your 10 months. It's a huge deal in our community. We go snaps, so everyone should do snaps, even though their cameras are off. Research is also incredibly fun. I work with a researcher, an associate producer, a co-producer, an investigative researcher. And, for this one specifically, we did like a 300-page book, which was really a timeline, because unfortunately for Britney, almost every day, almost every hour of her life was documented. And so we had these sort of this huge master document. And in terms of the other films that I make, it's really based on court cases. And so it's about sifting through all the court cases, making sure I'm finding new material. I would say that I probably am in the research phase, like it can be like, it can be from like maybe 2 months to 6 months. That's so when I get to the actual production and interviewing, I'm an encyclopedia and I know exactly sort of what to do. But that is just trying for your brain to figure out the scaffolding of the story. And then when you're in the field, is it fitting around that scaffolding? And then the edit, like you have somebody, like editors are the most important thing to me in terms of making documentary. Your film is only as good as your editor. And it's like, people are always like, oh, you directed all these things. I was like, yeah, I worked with an incredible editor named Andrew Kaufman, or Tim, or Jason, or Cindy Lee. And so the editor sometimes helps in the research phase. Lots of research.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. We have a question here from Snigadeb. Snigadeb, we've enabled you to unmute yourself. What is your question for Erin?
Hello, ma'am. First of all, my question to you is, first of all, congratulations on making such a good documentary on Netflix. So, ma'am, my question to you is, have you faced some kind of difficulties while making this documentary? Can you please share about that? And what was your influence of making this documentary?
What were the difficulties? I mean, imagine that nobody wanted to make it and nobody wanted to talk to you. And if you spoke about it, you'd be in legal trouble. What were not the difficulties? I think that a lot of people think of these companies, HBO and Netflix, as huge, but I'm a lady in the woods that's trying to do something. And so they're very different. I'm very different than the institution. I, typically have to take on risk. So that it mainly was people weren't talking to me, and it's really hard to make a documentary if people are not talking to you. And what is my interest in making this? I mean, have you seen a Britney Spears music video? Like, I am completely infatuated with her whole collection. And I wanted to know how somebody that powerful came to be in this dynamic that's called a conservatorship. And yeah, it's like, I still catch myself doing work on it. Like the other day, I was like going through things and I was like, no, you're finishing another thing right now. So it's definitely something that my brain like keeps coming back to. And I would say after I've done so I did Thought Crimes, my first film, which is about supposed cannibal cop, Mommy Dead and Dearest, which is about Gypsy Rose Blanchard, which would become The Act. I Love You Now Die, the texting suicide case, At the Heart of Gold, which is gymnastics, and that was about sex abuse and absolutely changed me. And then these other television shows, like I typically am like, okay, that is done, and I have to do my next thing, and I have to become a master of all the information related to this next genre. But I'm having trouble shaking the Britney stuff.
Thank you. We have a question, another question here from Merrily. Merrily, we've enabled you to unmute yourself. What is your question for Erin?
Hi, Erin. I was just wondering, I'm headed out there to take the 8-week class at New York Film Academy, but I have something in mind that I'm trying to get done. And I feel like that woman in the woods. So when you say you don't take unsolicited material or requests, how do you just have to make a lot of phone calls, try to find a rep? I would love to have a half an hour meeting with you if you could spare it, so I could
totally
pitch the idea.
You shoot your shot and ask for a meeting. It's amazing. You know, I think that it is about doing that, about being vulnerable. And for me specifically, this is what I tell people is the number one thing that when you as a person, regardless of age or who you are, to make a documentary is you need access. No one is going to give anybody a film where they do not have guaranteed access. It's very hard for people to give people money for something if they don't know is going to work. And so it's about one, do you have the access to the piece? And then do you have exclusive access? And I know that those are really, really high bars, but it's about then working on other people's stuff until you can get that right story. And then it's also about trying to find EPs. I first worked with Andrew Rossi, who is a producer on my first film. And, you know, I did not bother him. I remember one day I had sent him like 3 emails and he was like, what makes you believe that I'm just sitting here going to answer your emails? And then I learned how to produce myself and come to him in these big moments and these, you know, and then, you know, smaller moments where I really needed his feedback and advice and for him to help me. And so it's about access, exclusive access, reaching out to people that can help bolster your team. And here's the thing is that we're in an amazing time period right now. I started making my first film when I was 25. I don't know if that is incredibly rare. It's less rare today because networks, they want content and they want things that other people do not have. There are accelerators, there are programs, there are things, you know, at film festivals where you can submit your pitch and get sort of gap financing that you can get a bit of tape on. It's always important to try to shoot a little bit of it to show people, prospective people. And so I think that it's possible when I felt like it was kind of impossible before.
Thank you.
So we do have another question that was submitted by Michael, and he asks, in hindsight, is there anything that, if you could, you would have added to the documentary, and if so, what would it have been?
And I have to save it for part 2. I'm not saying anything. I'm hopeful that there's going to be a part 2. I don't know. You know, if that lives in like lives as it should, which is its own feature film. Yeah, there's incredible stuff that due to the total running time that I was aiming for. My mentor is the great epic Sheila Nevins. Everyone should Google her. And she wrote this amazing book called You Don't Look Your Age and Other Fairy Tales. And I was sitting with her one day and she said, you have to convince me for every minute that is longer than 82 minutes. And she just had this, like, she didn't think films should be longer than they needed to be. And it didn't help with audience retention. So by the simple fact of this woman saying it to me once, it created that. And then, so when people, I hope, knock on wood, when people watch my films, it's like whiplash. It's like, whoa, it's not sitting in the same stuff. And I think that there are beautiful filmmakers that have been on and that have spoken with Tova, like, you know, that have very long films. Like, I don't happen to be that person. And that also is why I get to make a lot of them. So I think that, yeah, I really believe strongly in mentorship, and I write down most of what she's ever said to me, and I continue to sort of, you know, think and get that sort of information, even when she does an interview or something like that. I read that and I like take notes from that, right? So even if you're just getting mentored from the internet through people, I think it's really, there's a lot of really strong advice out there.
Can you repeat her name again?
Sheila Nevins.
Oh, Sheila Nevin, of course. She was at the HBO, head of HBO documentary.
Now she's at MTV, you know, doing, and got their first Emmy. Yeah, it was nominated and then it won an Emmy for 76 days.
Yeah, she's legendary. There's no question about it. Yes.
We have a question here from Alejandro Prado. Alejandro, we've enabled you to unmute yourself. What is your question for Erin?
Hey, Erin. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here. I feel very excited and grateful to be here. And thank you very much for the incredible Britney documentary. As a fan, I feel very happy and I admire your work very much. And my question is, what was the part you enjoyed and hated the most about making the documentary, and how the creation of the documentary impact on your career as a filmmaker?
Okay, so the happiest part of my life, happiest part of the project is when Britney spoke during that June 23rd hearing, and she started at the beginning say they've done a pretty good job of taking over my life, so I want this. She said something, and I'm paraphrasing, but she said something, and it was like the most incredible. Nobody had ever heard her say anything like it, and to know that, I remember crying that day because it was like all that time I was like, am I making a film that she doesn't even agree with? And it was always very difficult to make a film about somebody that I didn't get to speak to. And, you know, frankly, I don't know if I'm going to do again because it's just too painful. And so when that happened, I felt a lot of relief, and I was finally able to. And then when she got out of the conservatorship and it was terminated, it was one of the best days of my life. And that, you know, I'm getting too close to the film. I think anybody who's on this, and this is why I really love talking to organizations like this, is like, you shouldn't have like this be your whole life. You know, it can be sort of problematic, but the hardest days, you know, when I got rough notes, or when it looked like, you know, a source had fallen through, or there was a lot of big cataclysmic, you know, big things to me where I was like, this is the worst, it's the end of the world. And now, you know, sitting here in my like cute little apartment, I just feel so far from it. So really trying to understand that, like, these moments where I think my world is ending because somebody said no, or I couldn't do something, you know, it'll feel real in that moment, but just to take it with some perspective. And in terms of how it changed my career, I mean, it's one of the biggest movies I've done. It had a very big audience. All of my films have been reviewed critically, like pretty unanimously celebrated, and this was medium, so that was a little like painful. You know, I think it's when you're doing a really like everyone's gonna have an opinion about Britney Spears. Everyone's gonna have an opinion about, you know, the lady in the hat that's in the film. And so, putting myself out there, it was just like, ooh, it was difficult. And I really love, like, you know, reading these incredible reviews about me and my work. And then when people didn't get it, it was really painful. But I'm an artist, I'm a filmmaker. Some people are not going to connect with it. And, you know, I really made it for people. And I can't even tell you, I got hundreds, if not thousands of messages about what it meant to people. And somebody in my life had the strength to leave an abusive relationship because she saw some of these same behaviors that she saw Britney's father participating in her relationship. And so there's a lot of real world sort of change to it. And, you know, I'm putting I have a thing for HBO that I'm really, really, really excited about. And that's going to come out, and, you know, making other things like, you know, what I like to make. And so it changed my career, but it definitely, like, I think that I won't know how it changed things until much later, but I'm just somebody that I just am grateful to have a job and employ people that I really care about. And so just, I guess, not like future tripping about it, but really being like, okay, like that was wonderful, amazing. And now I got to do some more research.
And now I got to do what?
Some more research.
I love that.
We have another question here. This one's from Mohammed Mansoor. Mohammed, we've enabled you to unmute yourself. What is your question for Erin?
Hello, Erin. First of all, thank you very much for making such wonderful movie. And I'm looking forward to be part of the NYFA as a filmmaker. I'm gonna start I just applied to get admission in the Masters in Filmmaking. So my question is that what instructions and guidelines you would love to give and share with the new upcoming filmmakers? Can you summarize the tips for them to prepare as filmmakers?
I have on my website, I have my 20 tips for breaking in. So if anybody wants to go to that, because I kept, this is a smart question. I kept getting asked it. And so I was like, okay, no path is linear. My path is very different from somebody else's, but what are some of the sort of the gems of wisdom that I, that I learned? And I really pushed access for the first film. Thank you, Helen. I pushed that I had this guy and he was in prison, and I just don't think anybody would, would agree to it. In terms of more bigger filmmaking, different filmmaking, not just rooted in documentary work. It's really studying the craft and understanding how can you add to this universe, and then starting in a practical place, writing this or shooting a scene or shooting a short film, or, going to the festival that's around you and watching 15 to 18 of the films. When I was making my first film, I watched a documentary film almost every night. So that ended up being hundreds of films, just because I wanted to know how other people did it. And then when I saw their choices, and I would end up diagramming. I only diagrammed about 20 of them in terms of cutting them into a 3-act structure. But when I was in the edit, it helped guide me. And it's not that I let other great filmmakers make decisions for me, but it was really okay, how is this following in terms of the cinematic universe, and what is the inciting incident, or what is the tension of the scene, and just being into the learning part of it. And I love learning, and I think that I'm a perpetual student. And I wasn't even that great of a student in college. University of Wisconsin was like, we are surprised because you were a B- student. They've asked me to come back and talk, and I'm like, thanks for all the student debt now. So it's really, it's never too late to be who you're supposed to be. And I think a lot of people would see me as a really young filmmaker, but I see a lot of if you put in enough work, then you can come up with a good idea. And yes, it's really painful and difficult to convince financiers and to get the right camera gear for that short. But I think it can happen.
Thank you for that. I do have another question that was submitted by Juan Montoya that asks, what do you think the impact of this documentary is, shining a light on conservatorships and the flaws in the legal system in the USA regarding the conservatorships?
Great question. Tova and I spoke up about literally this conservatory's inability to get a lawyer. That's something that I think is going to be looked at. Governor Newsom, the governor in California, has now putting in legislation that would change the rules of conservatorships. I think that now we're at this heightened public awareness in this arena, so that when people are, trying to challenge conservatorships, I think people are going to be, the legal system might be now more careful before putting somebody into one, but also acknowledging that there are situations where conservatorships do help people. This was not the case of this one, and that's my personal opinion. So I think that we're going to see some change, but it's always, as it is hard to track virality or any of these things, like we're going to sort of be feeling the ripple effects in the years that come. But I'm hoping that Britney is able to speak out on the conservatorship, because she has just this incredible platform of people wanting to hear what her experience was like. And so not placing any, she doesn't have to do the work. Like, we don't need anything from her. She's already given us so much, but it's incredible that she survived. And I think that her testament and her witnessing everything that she's gone through is powerful by itself. So we're going to see sort of what happens with, this sort of designation as a whole.
Thank you so much. And before time runs out, Tova, I know that there are a few more things that you wanted to talk to Erin about.
Yes, I wanted to know, you were saying something when we spoke about budget of documentaries, ballpark. Can you talk a little bit about that? Mm-hmm. When somebody starts out, obviously, maybe Netflix is more, fat in that regard than maybe HBO, I don't know. But just to give people a little bit of a ballpark, how you can make a documentary. And when you started out and you made those documentaries that obviously perpetuate you to where you are now, what was the ballpark of budgets?
And so what I can say is that when I was at Vice and I was making things like the How to Survive in Space or the Click Print Gun, How to Survive in Space was probably $5,000. We were shooting other things. We were block shooting. I stayed in a room with a male compatriot, which I would never do now. And it was like, I think 2 setups, a verite sequence and then an interview sequence. Click Print Gun was more expensive because I spent 3 days with the subject, Cody Wilson. But if I didn't have an actual sort of budget sheet on that, but I would guess it probably cost $12,000, something like that. And then when I was making my first film, we were putting up a budget and it was over $300,000. And I was like, whoa, what are we gonna do with all this money? And I remember I was sitting with a scripted, a co-creator, and he said the budget was $4 million. And I was like, $4 million for the whole show? And he was like, no, nut job, for each episode fee. So it's 4 times this many. And I was like, that is a lot of bones. I'm interested in that. So now I get to, I always joke around when people ask me for my advice. I say that's why I'm paid the documentary bucks. But you can, I think that I make things with big budgets now, which is excellent. And it provides an ability to work with the people that I want to. And really, Britney Vs Spears took 2.5 years. Michelle Carter took 3 years. At the Heart of Gold took 1.5 years. So it's they always seem like big numbers, but then when you spread it out, you're like, okay, I don't want to do an overage, what's going on. And so documentaries, feature documentaries range from anywhere from probably like 400,000 to 5 million. And if it's acquisition, sometimes you can get a lot of money, but that's typically like the range. And I think for episodes of TV, it's probably about, it ranges from like 400 on the low end to a million, like 1.3, maybe actually 1.8, something like that for an episode of television that's a documentary. So there's money in this space for sure.
But let's focus for a second, because if it's a student hears, okay, I can make a documentary with $5,000 or $10,000, that sounds doable.
Yeah.
And what did you spend money? What was the most important thing to spend money on in that little space of the 5,000 and the 10,000?
Yeah, sorry that I went on with all that. You're like, no, let's back it up, sister. It's, for me, it would be about lensing and about cameras. And specifically, I think you can really, that's where your money is going to show up tenfold. And if you can get a friend rate, or if you can just try to like do it with nice, like really nice, like lenses. And then you almost, if you have to like limit the shoot days because you need this camera, like you want it to look really, really good. I would do that. And then composing, if you can get somebody to compose, maybe it's an up and comer person, but that really elevates short films. And as I said before, the #1 role that has to be a marriage is an editor. And a lot of the filmmakers that I know, because I'm privileged to be a part of the documentary community, they edit themselves in order to save on that cost. And so I think that cheap flight, go to a Holiday Inn or shoot here. I mean, shooting in New York is awful and really expensive. Shooting in New Jersey or upstate New York, or going to a location, trying to beg, borrow, and steal for crafty and say, oh, I mean, I used to like, because I wear like pigtails, and when people stop me on the street being like, I'd be filming something like, oh, like you're not allowed to film. I was like, I'm a student, so I like, I just really need this for my class. And my DP is like, stop saying that. We're going to be found out. And so utilizing our role, like our in life, where people are good to students. People are good when they're like, trying to get, out into the world and saying, New York Film Academy, and I'm trying to make this, and, just, using the benefit of being at this juncture for people to help you. Because I definitely got a lot of help at the beginning.
That is very, very important, really. So just say a word about your new project, the television project with Elle Fanning, and then we'll just let you go back to your research.
So I'm lucky to be included on there for my Michelle Carter documentary. There was also this article by Jesse Barron, and UCP, the studio, bought the rights and ended up making an 8-part, are in the process of making an 8-part series about the Michelle Carter case with Elle Fanning as Michelle Carter. And I've been able to see the dailies, and I'm a consulting producer. And so, really they called me and said, well, what happened here? Or what do you think, da, da, da? And so when you're getting into the accuracies, and I think it's just helping me like wade into the scripted space, which is, it's right. Almost like documentaries are like when people are like, good job, kid. Oh, when are you going to make a real film? And I'm like, excuse me, I have made 7. So I'm not looking, like documentary is my, the best love of my life. And I'm probably one of the most happily employed people living in this city right now. But, I always like, what is the new challenge that I'm going to try? And, what can I be doing with my time? And the last pitch that I'll make is, as a sober person, I just get unlimited time. Like I know here that I can, be ready and be useful to Tova and to you guys. And then, I'm probably going to work a little bit, and then I'm going to get up and I'm going to work. And it's just saving your time in order to sort of focus. on many things. And the other thing is having multiple projects. Like if you're only working on one thing that you're trying to make, it's sometimes really hard for that to happen. It's a lot of pressure. And so what are like the 6 things that you're really interested about? And I have a running 6 things that I'm sort of investigating. So it keeps me occupied. But I did a lot of unsolicited and solicited advice tonight. Really appreciate being here. And I appreciate this program. Obviously, I look into every place that I'm, speaking to. And, Tova has such a long tradition of like making art, but also understanding art. And you guys are really lucky. And, this is the time where you can really concretize skills so that when you're in the field, you're not nervous about it. When I go into the field, I'm like, what's the light doing? Like, I had to like teach myself all of these things. And I think now that I know the technical side of filmmaking, it really allows me to be really creative because my brain isn't trying to figure this thing out. I can just use my brain to do this. So I feel like you guys are in a good place already.
I just want to say that I was very impressed because I did send you an invite and you immediately responded. And I know that you were really, really busy and working on a film and, and so there's something you can tell about a person from the way they react, the way they respond to an invite, the way they respond to life, and how it really manifests itself in the work. And now that I've met you, I just see the total package. And I think that it's evident to anybody who had listened to you tonight. I think that each one of the people that were here learned a lot from you. And that includes me, who's been in the industry for a long, long time. So there was time very well spent for us. And it seems like you enjoyed giving from your experience. And I cannot tell you how much we appreciate it and how much we thank you for spending your time with us and teaching us about the craft. So thank you.
I'm not so far away from the people inside this chat. You know what I mean? That's why I just, I want people to know that it's possible. And yes, there's luck and there's all these things attached, but I was watching Ron Howard's masterclass. I was like, I'm never going to make Ron Howard movies. And I was like, well, what if you just like learn what he's saying and then you apply it to your own thing? So anyways, I could talk forever about filmmaking, but I really appreciate being of use. That's part of my program, to be of use in life and in daily stuff. So appreciate all of you. Thank you for
we're wishing you continued success, and we are going to watch all those movies that you make because they're fun, they're on the wave. We are in with you. You're taking us to all those incredible places because you're there first, and we're gonna follow you and we're gonna learn from it. So thank you so much.
Thank you.